Hi everyone, and welcome to our September 4th class, which is on the topic of gender and introduction. So in this class session, we're going to cover a couple of different things in your textbook, and you'll have an additional online assignment. And I wanted to send you a brief recording in addition to what I've written in Blackboard to just give you an idea of what to expect for class that is online tonight. But to go back to the class session that we just finished, last week was August 28th, and the focus was on the counseling competencies, and then the participation activity was the multimedia gender introductions. So I sent out an announcement earlier today that should look something like this, and hopefully you received this long message from me just kind of explaining to you how I assigned the participation points, as well as linking you to a PowerPoint file. I took all of your image files. There are 12 of you in class, so there's 12 slides in this PowerPoint of your image files, and just put them in the order that they were posted on Blackboard. And it's pretty powerful, I think, to look at everybody's. And what I really want you to think about as you look at everyone's images, maybe one more time, is the meaning behind all of these, because that's what's most important, and that's what's most meaningful to your clients, is how they are making meaning of their experiences. It's the meaning that we assign to our roles and the events in our lives that really has a major impact on our well-being. And that's kind of at the core of things that we want to get to as counselors. We want to understand our clients' experiences, and we want to understand the thoughts and feelings that they have about those experiences. But we, in particular, also want to understand um, how they make meaning of those experiences. So here is the announcement, and for closing out August 28th. And then if you go to weekly course content, you will now see that I've opened up the session for you to view for this week. Today is September 4th. This is session 3, Gender and Introduction. But I've also opened up next week, which is session 4, Gender Aware Counseling Methods, September 11th. Now we're actually going to be face-to-face, thank goodness, next week. I'm looking forward to being in the classroom with you all again. But there are some reading materials that are not in your textbook. So for this week, for tonight, you're reading chapters 3, 4, and 5 in your textbook. But prior to class next week on the 11th, there are some journal articles that I want you to have read to add to our class discussion and activities. So now you can access those in this folder here. But going back and clicking on session 3, which is for today, you will see that I've described what you're expected to do this week, and that is basically to read the chapters 3, 4, and 5 in your textbook and one journal article. And 3 and 4 really are just some basic biological, physiological things for you to understand about male and female sexual anatomy. I highlight a couple of things that you might be particularly interested in looking at, might find those interesting. I want you to keep in mind that when we are back online for the 18th, that you will have a quiz about these 3 chapters. Then the journal article that you're reading is The Story of Manhood, and it talks about using a specific approach to therapy called narrative therapy. You should have all had counseling theories by now, and you would have been introduced to narrative therapy in that course. Narrative therapy really relies a lot on meaning making and how we use storytelling to help us out with our meaning making, and how you as a counselor can help your client to create a more positive story by helping them to tell their story differently to themselves. And so I want you to read that article, and then I want you to use that in your gender interview assignment, and I'll get into more detail about that later. I've also posted 2 videos. These are really, really brief. One is, I think, 3 minutes long, and the other's maybe 6 or 7 minutes long. So one of the videos is a professor who's well known in gender studies, and she's talking about how not how gender is performed, but how it is performative. So kind of how we act out our genders. And then the other video is an interview with an artist who's mentioned in your book, Nick Carras, and he's a photographer. If you look on chapter 3 on page 50, you will see his work, which is called Petals. And that's actually available in this folder. And that work is photography that is very up close of women's vulvas. And that's a really significant work because a lot of women go way into adulthood without being exposed to a non-airbrushed image or retouched, photoshopped image of another woman's vulva. And so a lot of women are very self-conscious about the appearance of their genitalia. And so having the opportunity to see works like this up close helps a lot of women to feel relieved and to feel normal and to really appreciate the full variation that there is in terms of vulval shape and size. So to summarize, you're going to read chapters 3 through 5. You're going to read the article, The Story of Manhood. You're going to complete a gender interview, and then you're going to bring that gender interview to class on the 11th. There's nothing for this week that you are going to need to post. There's no discussion board. I have included a really basic PowerPoint here about gender. It is very introductory, and it really highlights some things from chapter 5 that I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about. Very basic stuff and only a couple of slides. This is the journal article that you'll read, and then the gender interview instructions are posted here. What I want you to do is to pick somebody who's at least 21 years old and let them know that you would like them to participate in an interview about their experience as a man, woman, or transgender person. Now, I would really prefer you to pick someone who is not a gender that you are. So if you're in a pinch, you can't find anybody else to interview, then go ahead and interview somebody of the same gender as you. But my preference is that you interview someone who is not the same gender as you. You should plan for the interview to take about 45 minutes, and I want you to keep in mind that this is not a counseling session. In counseling sessions, the goal is to produce some kind of change in that client. You might be wanting to change them in a way that is healing or challenging or educational, but in this interview, you are there to listen and learn from the person that you are interviewing. And to use good listening skills, you'll need to apply active listening skills. You want to convey empathy. You want to use open-ended questions, and then this is where I want you to refer back to that Story of Manhood article. Think about some of the techniques that they used to help the clients in that case study that was in that article help the story of manhood to unfold. So regardless of whether you are interviewing a man, a woman, or transgendered person, help them let the story of their gender unfold. And some folks are going to be a little more talkative than others. Just make sure that you are not giving advice, you're not self-disclosing, and you're not doing interpretations of your interviewees' responses. You really are just there to listen and learn. I recommend that you record the interview. Nowadays, most people can record on their telephone pretty easily if you have a smartphone. We do have counseling equipment here on campus that you can come by and check out if you want to borrow one of our flip cams. But if you don't want to record it, then you're going to need to take notes during the interview. I would rather you not take notes during the interview because that's something else that separates you from fully listening. I want you to be completely attentive and engaged with that person and having good nonverbals. And I don't need a recording back. If you do a recording, the recording is for your purposes so that when you write up the paper, you don't have to recall everything from memory. So what you're going to turn into me is a single-spaced paper that summarizes your interviewee's responses to each of these questions. And these are the interview questions that I want you to use. You may end up asking some additional open-ended questions to help clarify or encourage your interviewee to talk more, but roughly these are the questions that you should make sure that you address. When you are typing this up in the paper, at the beginning of your paper, you're going to have a brief paragraph where you describe your interviewee using demographic information. So if you're interviewing me, then you would say that the interviewee is a 39-year-old white female who is originally from Virginia, is your professor, has 3 children, has been married twice, just some basic background information. And then you'll just list the questions and then list their responses below them. That's all. You don't have to analyze it. That's what we're going to do in class. And then I want you to be thinking about how you would answer some of these questions yourself as well. So that when we come into class, you're actually going to practice interviewing each other also, but in more of a counseling type way than you would with the interviewee. So that is it for the gender interview. If you have any questions about that, feel free to send me an email. If we can't address your questions over email, then come on into my office or give me a call. The best way to reach me by phone is to send me an email and let's set up a time to talk by phone. So here is the article that is about the professor in gender studies who talks about gender being performative. This is the interview with the photographer who took the photos of the women's vulvas, and this is actually that work that he created there. So you probably want to make this bigger on your screen when you are working on your assignments for this week. And that is probably one of those images that you might want to use caution about if you are working from a work computer, especially if you're in the school system. Alrighty, well, that does it for this week, and I really enjoyed learning about you in your posts last week, and I will look forward to seeing you face to face on the 11th. I'm going to be out of the office at a training that is actually kind of related to our course content. It's a women's leadership development training that is being held at Chapel Hill for people for women in academia from all across the state. So I'm looking forward to learning some more things from that class or that training that I can bring to our class. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to talking to you face to face next week.